About the second or third audit, somebody finally said, we talked to everybody in the chain except producers. Maybe we should talk to them more. And so starting about 2000, we started that process, and now finally in this audit, we're able to actually ask a lot of producers for their input, and we expanded the face-to-face surveys back into the feeding sector. And so to make that happen took a lot of effort and a lot of work. And representing Phase 3, I want to introduce to you Dr. Jason Ahola from Colorado State University. Jason has worked in this industry in the production sector and associations in all sorts of capacities. And I can't think of a better person to come and share with you the results of that survey and how those of us in the production side of this business look at the question of quality.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks everyone for being here today. It's an honor to be able to represent producers and the beef industry in terms of the data set that I'm going to share with you today. As Tom mentioned, this was a unique aspect not included in other audits, and I'll mention that in a second. But before I forget, there's a couple of people I want to recognize. Dr. Dan Hale from Texas A&M, I think, is in the back. He was instrumental in getting this component of the National Beef Quality Audit completed. And then Miranda Siss is the lead graduate student on this. She's in the back as well, or she better be. She really took the bull by the horn, so to speak, and she got this survey done. So to think about trying to survey basically all sectors of the beef industry in the entire United States is a pretty daunting task. But let me share with you some of the results that we've got. As it was mentioned, this is the first of its kind, and there's been several aspects of this audit that are the first of its kind, and this would be one more of those, where we really tried to leverage the other data that we collected on harvest floor, cooler, by incorporating data from producers. And I only have up there listed seed stock, commercial cow-calf, and stocker, because that was the original goal. But in reality, we incorporated all industry segments. So the objectives of what we called Phase 3, the number one thing was to document production practices that producers are using. We also worked to quantify the adoption level of beef quality assurance-based, quality-oriented management practices. We weren't necessarily only focused on, are you BQA certified or not BQA certified? We simply said, are you doing things consistent with BQA, or are you not doing things consistent with BQA? The third objective was to develop a benchmark against which to measure future audits, and I think it's very exciting to think that all of these phases will be incorporated into future audits. Boy, it'd be great if this data was available from back in 1991. It's not, but we have a place to move forward from. And then number 4, and I think most importantly, direct future educational initiatives for cattlemen to allow them to enhance the beef safety and quality that they produce. So the survey instrument that we created was a 43-question survey. We did this survey from April 2011 until February 2012, and we did it in two manners. It was available online at a website, or it was available via printed survey at cattle industry meetings. And the segments that we hit were basically all of those industry segments that you would assume, including the dairy industry. This was the online survey. We tried to get it so it was quick to take for a producer, 10 minutes or so. They just went through this series of questions, and they were routed different ways in this survey if they responded, I'm a dairy producer or I'm a feedlot or anything like that. And then we also printed a survey booklet for folks who wanted to complete it that way. Ultimately, we got about 3,755 surveys. It was about half and half online and written. And that represented 45 states. Overall, 3/4 of the respondents were in the cow-calf segment. Interestingly, the average cow-calf inventory, or cow inventory, was 192 cows. That's across all segments, because we did get some people that operated in multiple industry segments. Years in the industry, you can see 84% were more than 10 years, 55% more than 25 years. So there's really quite a bit of experienced cattle producers who completed this survey. So one of the first things we tried to do, and you saw it in the other phases, was get a sense of what do producers think about when they hear the word quality. And that's what we asked these producers. What does that mean to you in relation to the beef industry? And the top two reasons, or the top two definitions, were producing safe and wholesome beef and raising cattle and calves that are healthy. And you can see these were scored at a higher level than eating satisfaction, cattle being free from defects, cattle being profitable for the producer, cattle being profitable for others that maybe buy those cattle, USDA quality grade, and other things like that. So you can see safety and wholesomeness of beef and health of cattle are the two things cattlemen say are quality. We also asked, do you intentionally influence quality on your operation? And 96% of respondents said, yes, there's something I do in my farm or my ranch that influences quality. There are a few that don't recognize that, but the vast majority of producers do realize that. So we went one step further and we said, well, how do you influence quality? In your opinion, what are you doing on your farm or ranch that's influencing quality? And I was really a little bit surprised, but actually assured by the fact that the top item is good stockmanship and animal handling skills. The use of good stockmanship and animal handling skills was mentioned by 93% of producers in terms of the importance of that on quality, or how that could influence quality. Preventative health care, such as how vaccinations are given, 89% use of sound nutritional program, best management practices, genetics, those were down the list. But I think the two to highlight is the good stockmanship and animal handling and preventative health care. I think you'll start to see a thread here of what producers are thinking about quality and how they might influence quality down the chain. In terms of health management of cattle, we asked producers, do you have a working relationship with a veterinarian? In the beef quality assurance circles, this is called a veterinary client-patient relationship. But we said, do you have a working relationship with a veterinarian regarding the use of animal health products? 9 out of 10 said that they did. And that's either vaccines to prevent disease, or that's treatments such as antibiotics to treat disease. So the vast majority of producers are working closely with their veterinarian. And I think this is a great point as we move forward on issues like the judicious use of antibiotics, how important a role a veterinarian can play in that process. We also asked producers, do you have a routine health protocol for vaccinating cattle or treating cattle? 95% had some level of health protocol, but only 31% of them had it in writing. So there's a lot of great memory ability in our cattle producers to be able to remember exactly what they're supposed to give a calf when he's sick. But I think this is a great opportunity for producers to begin documenting or increasing the documentation of what they're doing via record keeping and focusing on assuring consumers of what they're doing. They're spending the time and doing the hard work, but nobody knows about it down the chain. We also asked a few questions about some traditional beef quality assurance related practices, one of those being the route of injection. We asked, if given the choice, which do you prefer, intramuscular or subcutaneous? And I've got acronyms across the top there, but starting on the left, all is all survey respondents total together. 84% said I'd choose subcutaneous. I would guarantee if we asked this back in the 1991 audit, it would be a much different number. So I think some great accomplishments on this slide. We move across there, seed stock, cow-calf, backgrounder, preconditioner, stocker, yearling, feedlot, and dairy. And I will point out there, the one industry segment we have not seen as much advancement as the other segments is the dairy industry. Again, if we went back to 1991, I guarantee that number would be different. I'm sure it's improved. I think we still have some opportunity there for improvement. We also asked, where do you give injections? Where's your preferred location? Front of the shoulder, top of the hip, lower rear leg. You can see the other options there. Vast majority of producers across all segments, 87% say my choice is front of the shoulder in the neck region. D. Griffin's really coming through for us on that one. But it's a great sense there to see producers actively choosing a place on the animal that has the least damage to valuable cuts. We do still have some producers doing the top of the hip and lower rear leg. And I will also mention here, and I'm not trying to throw darts at the dairy industry, I grew up in that industry, but about 41% of dairy producers would choose top of hip or lower rear leg as their preferred injection site location. I think we've improved there, but again, for moving forward in our marching orders, I think there's opportunity there to make some continued improvement. Primary driving tool. We asked producers, when you're working cattle, what's your primary driving tool? Sorting stick was number one. Amazingly, or very encouragingly, I'd say, over 98% of respondents did not use an electric prod as their primary driving tool. I think that's extremely encouraging to think of the fact that producers, in many cases, use no driving tools, rattle paddles, or a sorting stick. The vast majority of producers have really focused on low-stress handling and concerns what they might be doing to cattle in terms of stressing them out when working them. We also, of the producers, in total, we said, do you use an electric prod? 50% said no, we don't use an electric prod on our cattle. Of those that did, 86 used it on less than 10% of their cattle. So it's a very, very small fraction of producers are using electric prods on more than 10% of their cattle. Again, I think this is a great accomplishment that the beef industry's had. I would hope that this room, if anyone, would be very aware of beef quality assurance. But just in case we have to be on the same page, I want to take one slide here to reiterate the focus area of beef quality assurance. It's a voluntary program. It's an educational training program for producers to worry about or learn about on-farm and on-ranch day-to-day practices that might influence beef quality. By participating, producers accept responsibility for managing cattle to produce the safest, highest quality beef products possible. And I mention that because that was one of the other components of our survey, was finding out, what do you know about beef quality assurance? In the survey to this point, we hadn't even mentioned the words beef quality assurance or BQA. We just tried to sort of mirror what BQA was. And at this point, we said, even the left-handmost bar, we asked them, have you ever been to a meeting where it was talked about how you might influence quality of beef in terms of injection site lesions or animal handling or a variety of other things? We didn't even mention, have you been to a BQA meeting? Have you been to a meeting that talks about these ideas? 78% of respondents had. We then asked them, have you heard of beef quality assurance? 87% that said that they had. Of those producers, 71% actually had attended a BQA meeting or training event. And we asked them, of those producers that were BQA certified, we say, why do you choose to follow BQA guidelines? Why do you do that? The number one reason is because it's the right thing to do, 87% of producers. The second one, I'm committed to continuous improvement, 84%. Those are pretty important numbers, I think, especially when you look at, I receive a premium as 35%. This is a great story to tell. It's not all about profit. We all know that. And we would love to have beef quality assurance certification being the economic driver that drives the whole industry. But cattle producers recognize our industry may not be set up that way, or maybe it moves that direction, but it's going to be a while before we're truly there. In the meantime, I do these things because it's the right thing to do, and because I'm committed to continuous improvement. And I guarantee if a consumer wants to hear two good things about the beef story, I would have to think it'd be those two things. Those who attended a BQA meeting were more likely to use animal ID, keep written records, have a veterinary client-patient relationship, give subcutaneous injections, and train workers. We actually compared in our data set those that had attended a meeting and those that hadn't, and there were marked differences that were statistically different in how they operated their operations. So we can show in multiple ways how beef quality assurance has had an impact in terms of its influence on quality. This is my last slide. And I, being a state beef quality assurance coordinator in the state of Idaho for 5 years, am very passionate about BQA, and I know there's a lot of other people in the room. And I think we can take a second here and say, that there's quite a few of these improvements in these audits, or that this audit has shown versus previous audits, that we can credit at some level to the beef quality assurance program. That's longer, older than the first audit. But amazingly, during that past 20 years, since 1991 and even into the 1980s, beef quality assurance has been run on a near shoestring budget and on almost heroic efforts by some state coordinators. Imagine if we could fully fund beef quality assurance, what we could accomplish. I look forward to the discussion, and thanks very much for having me.